On Tech News Today, a former Googler launches a blocker that blocks the ad blockers. BuzzFeed launches a great news app, and we'll tell you why Twitter is getting into the artificial intelligence racket. It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Thursday, June 18th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Braintree. If you're working on a mobile app and searching for a simple payment solution, check out Braintree. With one simple integration, you can offer your customers every way to pay. To learn more, for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to braintreepayments.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. I'm Mike Elgan, and our co-anchor today is Fusion editor Kashmir Hill. How are you doing, Kashmir?
Hey, I'm good, Mike.
Now, really interesting news this morning, probably one of the most interesting tidbits. It's just a little bit of news, but it's important. Mark Gurman at 9 to 5 Mac is reporting that Apple is going to put a camera in the front of the Apple Watch so you can do FaceTime videos, FaceTime video calls, just like Dick Tracy. How cool is that? Are you an Apple Watch user, by the way?
I don't have one yet, though I have played with one.
Will a FaceTime camera lure you in?
Well, what I think is interesting about putting a camera in is once, Google Glass had a camera, people were very worried about people wearing Google Glass coming into bathrooms, coming into private spaces. So I wonder if this is going to cause a kind of privacy freak out around the Apple Watch.
Probably. But I mean, the same journalists who are complaining about Google Glass, the second Meerkat hit, they were recording everything in sight without permission from anyone. So I think the idea of whether or not you're violating somebody's privacy is all in the eyes of the beholder. And so we were talking very briefly before the show about another story that you're interested in, which is the whole Gawker situation with Hulk Hogan. Can you summarize what that conflict is all about? What's going on there?
Yeah, this has been getting a lot of attention from the New York media because it's Gawker, the beloved gossip blog. And in 2012, Gawker published a minute and a half from a 30-minute sex tape of Hulk Hogan having sex with a woman in a canopy bed. And Hulk Hogan says he didn't know that the tape was being made and that it was released without his consent. And so he sued Gawker for $100 million for invading his privacy and causing emotional distress. And now Gawker has to defend its decision to publish what we now kind of call revenge porn, saying that it had the right to do so under the First Amendment.
And really, Gawker's survival is at stake here, isn't it? I mean, this lawsuit could actually wipe them out financially.
Yeah, apparently their insurance companies have said they will not cover the loss. And so if Hulk Hogan really is awarded $100 million, Gawker says it doesn't have the money to pay. So people that have been reporting on this says that, if Gawker loses, this is the end of Gawker. So it's the fight for Gawker's life. Yeah,
and, on the one hand, sometimes content, video content, even if it's objectionable, even if it's, lurid or whatever, is newsworthy. In this case, I'm not so sure, but sometimes it crosses over into pornography or revenge porn or whatever, and that's essentially a news judgment that has to be taken into consideration. Now, this would be completely different, wouldn't it, if he said, "Oh yeah, I recorded it," and if he knew more about it, it would be different. I think.
Yeah, I think he still would fight it, and the question is the tape itself, this snippet of him actually having sex, is it newsworthy? Was it necessary to put in there to tell the story? And Gawker is arguing that it is, and the government is usually really averse to telling the media what is and what isn't newsworthy. They like the media to decide. So it'll be an interesting case, and I think it raises larger issues about what the media can publish. And so if Hulk Hogan loses, does that mean that all sex tapes, make all sex tapes more likely to be published by the media if they're considered newsworthy, / if people are interested in them? Yeah.
I mean, just the fear that I might accidentally click on a Hulk Hogan sex tape made me avoid Gawker for a year. And that fear continues today. So, yeah. something to be avoided. So why don't we jump into the to the news? A new company and product called SourcePoint launched today. SourcePoint exists to block the ad blockers. Robert Cookson is the digital media correspondent for the Financial Times and joins us to talk about it. Welcome to you, Robert.
Hi, Mike.
Now, how does SourcePoint work exactly? What is SourcePoint and how does it work?
Well, its mission is, as you say, it's to block the ad blockers. It's to provide online publishers with a powerful new weapon to get their revenues back up to where they'd be if a significant proportion of their users weren't blocking their ads. Its exact technology is a bit of a secret sauce, but essentially, as I understand it, they provide tools that will bundle up the ads with the main content of a site and serve it all via the same computer server of a publisher in a way that if a blocker blocks it, they'll block everything. So the blockers can't disentangle the ads from the main editorial content.
And who is behind SourcePoint?
So there's a guy called Ben Barocas who's behind it. He's one of the real big guns in the advertising technology world. He sold his previous business, AdMeld, to Google for $400 million and worked at Google for a few years before leaving about a year ago to set up SourcePoint. He's assembled a kind of crack squad of guys from all the big ad tech companies, AppNexus, DoubleClick, LiveRail, and so on. And it looks pretty serious. They've also raised $10 million of financing from some big names in the venture capital world. So this looks like the first really, really serious and credible attempt to fight back against blockers.
One of the things that I'm really interested in here is that he's been in a variety of interviews, Cookson has been talking about the idea that when you go to a web-supported site, there's a transaction that takes place. There's a deal, an implicit deal that you get this content for free, and in exchange, we're going to throw ads at you. But if you don't want to see the ads, maybe we'll make another deal. That's the part of this that I think is really interesting. Can you talk about what they're talking about in terms of alternatives to ads for the audience and also for publishers?
Well, right. So as you say, sort of, there's always been this implicit trade-off. As a consumer, you go to a website and you access their content and you see ads in exchange. But it's been all too easy for people to, install an ad blocker and scrap, what might be seen as their side of the deal. What SourcePoint is trying to do is trying to make this this implicit transaction explicit. And so if you come to a website with an ad blocker enabled, they'll throw up some kind of screen giving you an option about the type of advertising you'd be willing to see, or even if you're really anti-advertising, they might ask you to pay some kind of fee. Who knows how much that would be? That'll be an interesting number to view the content without the ads. Exactly what this will look like, how much customization will be on offer is yet to be determined because publishers haven't started rolling it out. Who knows how interested publishers will be? Will consumers like this type of thing, or will they think, screw it, I'm just going to leave this site altogether? But essentially, they're trying to bring more of a kind of back and forth relationship between the viewer of a website and the publisher.
Ad blockers have been around for years now, and I'm always surprised by how few people that I know in my circles actually use them. And I've been hearing for a long time from the publishing industry that this is a serious threat, but it seems like we haven't quite gotten to the point of it being as big a threat as I thought it would be. Do you know where we are in the state of the industry in terms of how much revenue is being lost by publishers because people are using ad blockers?
It's very hard to put very hard numbers on it. There are some estimates out there that as of last year, about 140 million people were using ad blockers. That's only about 5% of the online population. So it's still a niche phenomenon, but it is widely seen as rising very fast. And if you go to, you talk to publishers with sites that have a young male tech-savvy demographic, so video game websites, for instance, they see huge proportions of their users using ad blockers, up to about 50%, which clearly has an enormous impact on their ability to survive. For more general news sites, it's probably, it's still a fairly niche niche thing, but everyone sees it coming. And what's changing is that the ease of using ad blockers, it's becoming easier and easier. It's coming onto mobile. There's more and more talk about even possibility of network operators installing kind of mass blocking across their networks. So publishers are starting to wake up to the fact that even if this isn't yet, killing their businesses, there's a possibility, if trends continued and nothing was done about it, that it could start to have a significant impact.
One of the things that I think is interesting about this is that in this case, you're seeing the headlines and they're screaming that, somebody's cooking up this plan, no pun intended, Robert Cookson's behind it, cooking up a plan to block the ad blockers. And so the people who use ad blockers might feel immediately outraged by that their ad blocking is going to be defeated. But in fact, it seems to me that people who use ad blockers today should be in favor of this initiative, simply because it requires a certain type of person to use an ad blocker, a very technically savvy, technically active user. And so the kinds of products, the kinds of companies that would target that kind of user are going to be disadvantaged. Those companies are going to have less revenue. Those companies are going to have a harder time monetizing their websites. And so it essentially biases the internet's content away from technical content, theoretically. And so to have an alternative like this where people can pay if they choose, or to have some other monetization, should be something that I think that people who are in favor of web blocking would be could get behind. Are you sensing anything like that out there with the conversation that's resulted from this news, or is this news not been in the wild long enough?
Well, who knows what the sort of the mass population of ad blockers will make of it? I mean, I imagine most of them will be pretty annoyed at the idea that they're going to be thwarted on some sites. But ultimately, I think everyone must realize that for the internet as we know it to survive, for the free content that we love to be produced, advertising has to be shown. Now, there's a debate to be had about whether there's too much aggressive, intrusive advertising out there and whether it should be toned down. And this whole battle between the ad blockers and the blockers is helping that debate to be had. But ultimately, the internet as we know it cannot exist without advertising. People have to accept they will have to see some ads, or they're going to have to pay. And I think people would, in the main, much rather see ads than have to fork out money for these services they're currently using for free.
Yeah, and again, there's a raging conversation in the chat room about whether or not ad blockers are unethical. And my personal view is that, ad blockers are not unethical, but I do think that advertising itself is an ethical form, theoretically, of monetization, simply because the internet is global, and advertising makes content free, which means people who couldn't afford to pay for that content or that information or those services get that stuff for free. And as soon as you put up a $5 a month charge for something, well, it's you creating a digital divide. There's a huge swath of the world's population that just could not afford to pay $5 a month. And so that's my own view on it. I just hope that, I see this kind of constructive, it seems to me constructive initiative to figure out the problem rather than just have this battle between the ad blockers and the advertisers continue without there actually being a conversation behind it about how to monetize the content that we all enjoy. Robert Cookson is at ft.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Robert_Cookson. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. More news in a sec, but first let's talk about Braintree. Braintree is the way to implement a full-stack payment platform for your app or your website. You can take MasterCard, American Express, Discover, Diners Club, PayPal, Apple Pay, Venmo, Visa, even Bitcoin, and you don't have to really do anything other than implement their very simple code. You can probably do it in about half an hour. If you're a mobile app developer, you've got to check out Braintree. It's used by major companies like Uber and Lyft, Airbnb, Hotel Tonight, and more. They even offer a JavaScript library for mobile and desktop web. They have mobile SDKs for iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. And on the server side, they have libraries in 6 languages: Ruby, Python, PHP, Java, Microsoft.NET, and Node.js. Braintree replaces the old and busted model of a payment gateway, and they just give you that simple code that takes care of all that stuff for you. No minimum or monthly fees, no red tape. Braintree gives you a full-stack payment solution, support for all payment types for your customers, and you can start accepting PayPal, Apple Pay, Bitcoin, Venmo, credit cards, and more, all with a single integration. And that's across all platforms and with superior fraud protection, superior customer service, and fast payouts. To learn more and get your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to BraintreePayments.com/TNT. BuzzFeed launched a news app for iOS today, and no, it's not all about listicles and link bait. It's a serious news app for serious news readers. Joseph Lichterman is a staff writer for Nieman Lab and joins us right now. Welcome to you, Joseph.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Now, first of all, can you tell us about the app itself? What's it like to use this app?
Yeah, so the app is really, there are two main sections of it. The first is called Catch Up, and it's a mix of BuzzFeed's own stories and stories from elsewhere from around the web. So they link out pretty heavily as well. And the top of that section is it's sort of a what you missed. So basically it's pretty updated pretty regularly, and it's a hit of 4 or 5, depending on the situation, sort of the top news stories of the day. And then the other section of the app, which I think is pretty interesting as well, is notifications. They're really prioritizing push notifications, and you can personalize them. So if there are topics you're interested in, major breaking news, the world, politics, things like that, and certain stories as well. So today, for instance, with everything going on in Charlotte, you can opt in and get notifications on Charleston, excuse me, on what's going on in Charleston. And similarly, you can set a do not disturb. So if you don't want to get push notifications in the middle of the night, they won't send you any also.
How does it compare to the other news apps that are out there, like New York Times Now?
It sort of has that similar feel as Circa as well, sort of very segmented and meant for mobile and really optimized for sharing also. So every element or module within the app has a share button. And so it includes not only a link, but also an image. So obviously posts with images do well on social media. So it'll have a photo and a little headline and blurb as well. But also it's still distinctly BuzzFeed. It's you don't see very many other news apps that have as much emoji usage as this one does. So it definitely still has that GIFs as well, that feel for BuzzFeed. But it's really a serious news product, like you said.
Now, you mentioned in your article that BuzzFeed hyped the crap out of this app. Why do they do that? Why is their philosophy to be so over the top in terms of promotion of their stuff?
Yeah, they really talked about this a lot in public. If you search on Twitter, hashtag Team News App, you'll see months and months worth of tweets about it. And really their philosophy is they want to get as much feedback as possible. So getting it out there and having people sort of consume this type of content and get a sense of what they're doing lets them get feedback from real people, the type of people they want to actually be listening to or reading and using this type of content in their news app. And similarly, they in February launched a newsletter, an email newsletter with the same tone and type of content that you're seeing in the app. And a lot of the ideas that they developed for the newsletter then translated into the app. And you can see a lot of influence going back and forth between the two.
It seems like a very Silicon Valley approach to rolling out a product. It's interesting to see there's been this tension about whether to host news content on Facebook's platform. And BuzzFeed was famously one of the news publications that reportedly rejected Facebook and didn't want to put their content there. Do you think this app is going to help them to get people using BuzzFeed's platform? Are readers interested in news apps, or do they prefer going to a place like Facebook or Twitter to get their news?
Yeah, I think it's a mix, and BuzzFeed's real philosophy with this and with regards to social media as well is they just want to get their content out there on as many platforms as possible. So they're taking part in Facebook's instant articles, and so they're out there on Facebook, out there on Twitter, and they really don't care how people are coming to their content. They just want people to share it and want people to find it. And just this morning, Jonah Peretti, BuzzFeed's CEO, put out a blog post explaining why BuzzFeed is interested in news. And he basically explained that this type of news content that is big stories and breaking important stories is highly shareable. And so it might not be the same type of stuff as cats or quizzes or stuff like that, but that shareability factor definitely fits into the larger BuzzFeed ethos and sort of what they're all about.
Yeah, they kind of have a split personality. They're known for both really good journalism and also for link bait. And somebody in the chat room said, after you mentioned that there are two tabs, one of which is called Ketchup, whether the other tab was called Mustard. No, it is not. It's called My Alerts. Joseph Lichterman is at neimanlab.org, and you can follow him on Twitter at @ylichterman. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joseph.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
All right. Twitter has acquired a 5-person artificial intelligence startup called WetLab. Yeah, you heard that right. Twitter is getting into the AI business. Kurt Wagner is a reporter for Recode and joins us to talk about it. Welcome to you, Kurt.
Hey, good morning, Mike. How's it going?
It's going great, thank you. Now, why does Twitter want to get into AI?
So for Twitter, one of the things that they've really been working on over the last, I guess, year or two has been figuring out the way to show people on Twitter the tweets they actually want to see, right? I mean, when you follow people on Twitter, unless you really go through and curate the people you follow every day or have a lot of lists set up, it's really easy for stuff to get lost. I mean, there's millions of tweets a day and probably thousands in every person's timeline. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to identify the kinds of things that you want to see and then show you that before you even ask for it. So I think that there's a lot of ways that they could use AI stuff. I think right now that's probably the most likely, is trying to find the relevant content on Twitter for each user and then kind of give that to them so they don't have to go searching for it.
What kind of work was WetLab doing before being acquired by Twitter? And are they going to continue working on those projects?
So they were still in beta mode, and my understanding is the technology is essentially something that you would use if you're doing an AI or a machine learning experiment. What it does is it kind of automates some of that process for you. So I'm not an AI expert, but apparently there's a lot that goes into setting up these types of tests and experiments. And so the technology that WetLab was building was intended to simplify this and automate some of that so that it doesn't require so many people to run tests. And so I think Twitter did buy the technology as well. So in addition to the 5 employees that are the 5 WetLab employees who are now going to be joining Twitter, they also have the technology they've been working on. So I think the idea is that they're going to try and speed up their own AI tests and probably do a lot more of those moving forward.
Do you know what is to become of WetLab's existing product, which I believe is now in beta?
Yeah, so they said that they're going to be shutting down the beta beginning, I believe it's mid-July, maybe July 15th or so. So it sounds like the technology will live on, but it will live on inside Twitter. It doesn't sound as if they're going to be letting other people use that right now. Twitter does have a lot of developer tools that they lend out to others. So perhaps in the future they might include this and share the WetLab tech or the AI tech with other people outside the company. But my understanding is that, at least for now, it's going to live, but only inside Twitter.
Do you have any idea how this is going to change the experience for Twitter users? Are they going to see this, or is this more of a back-end product?
I think if it works correctly, it'll probably be a back-end thing, right? I mean, I think what you would see as a user is hopefully when you log into Twitter and it shows you, hey, tweets you might be interested in or people you might want to follow, it's going to be more relevant to you. I think that's the point. But you're not necessarily going to know, oh, this is WetLab technology that gave me this recommendation. I mean, if all goes well, this all happens behind the scenes and it makes Twitter look like it's just a really smart service. So I think from a user standpoint, this doesn't necessarily change a whole lot unless, or I should say until, they start to implement this and maybe not WetLab technology specifically, but they start to implement more AI-related tests and experiments and features. And that's when you may notice a difference from a user perspective, but you're not going to necessarily know that came from this acquisition.
Kurt, in the wake of the departure of Dick Costolo, you wrote a piece about what he might do next. He basically said he doesn't know. And you mentioned that he used to be a stand-up comic. Have you ever seen his comedy? Is this on YouTube somewhere? I hear people say that, but I've never actually seen any of his material other than, in earnings reports.
Right. Now, the material that I've seen is just what you just described, when he's kind of on at events. I've talked to him personally a few times, and actually he's not, he's not always cracking jokes when you're just talking to the guy, but he is got a personality that's really electric, and he's got a lot of energy, and he, I would imagine, be pretty hilarious. I would love to see him do a stand-up bit about Silicon Valley tech. I mean, wouldn't that just be great for him to get on stage, even for just 10 minutes, and kind of I don't know, play up some of the stereotypes and the cliches that we see every day in the tech world? I think that'd be great. If I'm HBO Silicon Valley, I'm giving Dick Costolo a call right now and seeing if he wants to make a cameo next season.
A cameo, or be a consultant or something. I mean, get him involved. He's just sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah, apparently he's got nothing else to do. So I'm sure he'd love to go on TV and you know, mock the tech world a little bit.
Wouldn't we all? Kurt Wagner is at recode.net. You can follow him on Twitter at KurtWagner8. Thanks for joining us today, Kurt.
Yeah, thank you both for having me. Take care.
All right, bye-bye. Unlikely partners Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Mozilla are working together to create a bytecode for use in future browsers. The new format could make loading web pages 20 times faster. It's called WebAssembly. The binary format could eventually replace the much slower JavaScript. WebAssembly is still in its infancy and will be years before browsers can actually use it. You see, Kashmir Hill, it can be done. These mortal enemies can work together for the good of mankind.
I love that people think that these companies hate each other. I mean, it's pretty often that they get together and talk about ways to improve technology, to improve security. You know, Google and Yahoo have been working together on building end-to-end encryption for email. I mean, they do like to kind of make the experience better for their users, and sometimes that involves working together.
Yeah, if they have to. If they have to. Well, in product update news, Twitter is working on a secret feature called Project Lightning, according to an exclusive on BuzzFeed. The feature will live on Twitter's mobile app, and a new button will exist at the center of the home row. When you press it, you'll be taken to a screen showing events that people are currently talking about on Twitter. When you choose a topic, which could be, you know, breaking news, event, television, or some other kind of big topic, you'll go to a view where each screen will be taken over by a big picture or tweet. The event sites will be curated by Twitter staff, and they'll create an experience around the event with timelines and other custom content. The events will be viewable offline even, and will even be embeddable on websites. This sounds to me like something similar to the BuzzFeed News app, or at least to try to satisfy a similar desire, and also similar to Facebook's recent instant feature that preloads content onto Facebook, so that when you touch it, you know, when you open it on your app, it's already there, and very, very fast. This sounds like a good idea, Kashmir Hill, but is this the kind of thing that the world is clamoring for?
I mean, I think it's a good idea for, well, what Twitter is trying to do right now is they're not seeing huge user growth. And so they're trying to figure out how to make their product useful for people who are not Twitter users. So it's really interesting this is available to people who are not logged in, that might just come to Twitter looking for news. And that is really what Twitter is best at, is breaking news. And so making that content accessible to people who aren't Twitter users is super smart. And, you know, Twitter and Reddit are some of the best places to go for news that's moving really, really quickly. So I think this is a good idea. I think people will actually go to Twitter to get news. So I suspect it will get used.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying it. Well, today's hack attack is the hacking collective Anonymous, which took responsibility for crashing several Canadian government websites in a DDoS attack. They claim that the action was in retaliation for a new anti-terrorism law just passed by Canada's lawmakers. The main site for government services, which is canada.ca, and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service websites were both affected. And, you know, anybody can launch a DDoS attack. Well, that's not true. Not anybody can, but that's the surest way to hack. You don't have to crack passwords. You don't have to do anything other than throw a ton of traffic. And so this will likely have zero effect on the government.
Yeah, I mean, these seem to be like more smoke than fire, except when you do the DDoS attack and you're able to get into the back end of the website afterwards. That can be really troubling. But as long as they have a good tech setup and it's just the website coming down and not granting access to the back end, this should be a very short news cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got a couple of big numbers for you. Actually, one is a very big number and one is a very small number. The big number is 49. That's how many dollars Apple charges for its lowest price sports band for the Apple Watch. Okay, here's the small number. 2. That's how many dollars it costs Apple to make that band. And that estimate, of course, doesn't include packaging, shipping, design, and all the rest. But still, the data comes from Slice Intelligence and was provided exclusively to Reuters. Kashmir Hill, if Apple's good at anything, it's making tons and tons of money. Really impressive.
It's true. They are impressive.
Well, and the bands are cool, too. I mean, it's a nice band. But
which one do you have there?
This is the one we're talking about, the sports one. It's a cool kind of rubber. You know, it's kind of scratch-proof, resistant rubber, but $50? I don't know. I think like $10 would be probably a lot more like it. Well, we got some email from a TNT fan named Andres Bautista in Montreal about Google Play Music All Access. And what he said was, last week while you were talking about Apple Music, you or your guest said that one of the key elements of this new service was the fact that it would allow users to blend the music you owned with the ones that are being streamed. My question is, isn't that what Google Play Music All Access does? I don't use the service. And also, what's the market share? And awesome show. Keep it up. The answer is yes. My Google Plus, I crowdsourced that question. The answer is yes. There's a lot of enthusiasm out there, at least on Google Plus, for Google Play Music All Access. And I don't know the market share number. Kashmir Hero, do you by chance have a sense of what the market share is for these various music services like Google Play Music All Access?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. It may not be knowable. I know that they're not the leader. Spotify is definitely the leader, and of course, this feature that is something that exists. The idea that you blend the music you own with the ones that you're streaming that you don't own. This is another example of Apple Music essentially just cherry picking many of the features that have been in existence for a long time. I was a little bit stunned by their Apple Music announcement because it had so little to offer in terms of new technology, new features, new anything. It's just Apple doing what lots of other companies are doing. And in this case, Google Play Music All Access has already been doing this. So it's a great feature. It's just not all that new. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Eduardo Conscanetto. I'm sorry about munging your name. And he is in Houston, Texas, and he posted this picture on Twitter. He says it's Messy Desk Day. There it is. Yeah, I can see that. Messy desk. It's got a TV
messy,
mounted there.
but he has a good color scheme. It's all
very
black
nice.
and white.
Yeah,
gray.
very nice. Very stylish. Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup or your messy desk and post it on Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, or Instagram. And use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT so we can find it. Kashmir Hill, what are you working on these days, and how can people read your work?
I am, as usual, writing about privacy and technology following that Gawker-Hulk Hogan lawsuit. I'm writing at Fusion's Real Future, and you can find me on Twitter at CashHill. Fusion's
Real Future, that is a cool site. Everybody should check it out. And again, I really enjoy your journalism. You're really good at it. And thank you so much for co-anchoring today.
Thank you for having me on.
All right. You can subscribe to Tech News Today on Spotify, or you can choose another way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. You can watch us live every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1700 UTC at twit.tv. Just press the live button. If you're ever near Petaluma, California, come on in and watch us as part of our studio audience. Just send email to tickets@twit.tv before you come in. If you'd like to help us grow our audience, just post a link to twit.tv/TNT on your favorite social network and tag 3 friends and tell them to subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV. You can follow me on all the social networks at elgan.com. Also, don't miss Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight. That is the Tech News Today. This show was technical directed and edited by Anthony Nielsen. My name is Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.